Morning, everyone. Welcome to our subject, reading and writing composition. For today's topic, we will be talking about writing comparison and contrast text. So when writing a comparison and contrast text, or composition, you will analyze, of course, not only one, but more than one subjects. And we will be discussing this today. So let me share to you my screen. So before going further, let me share to you our objectives for today's lesson. Here are our objectives. Of course, you're going to write a composition using comparison and contrast, define revisions, identify the different punctuation marks, observe the appropriate spelling when revising a comparison, use the appropriate transition or signal words for a comparison and contrast text. So those are the objectives. Now, can you write a comparison and contrast text? And do you think you can make your compositions better through revisions? So to begin with, let me define comparison. To compare means that you will focus, of course, on the subject's individual elements that make them similar to the subjects they are being compared with. And while contrast means that you're going to highlight the components that make them different to the subjects they are being compared with. Now, in comparison and contrast writing is used to show a reader, of course, the similarities and or differences between two subjects. Comparisons writing focuses on similarities, ways that they are alike, while in contrast writing focuses on differences or ways that they are not alike. Okay? In the composition, there will be a need for you also to make a revision. Okay? So in making a revision, it states here that revision is often defined as the last stage in the writing process, pre-writing, writing, and revision. According to Summers, 1982, on the other hand, sees revision as a process of making changes throughout the writing of a draft, changes that work to make the draft congruent with a writer's changing intentions. That is according to Summer. Now, in making a revision, you also need to use a lot of words, and we call this as transition or signal words. And I will be showing some examples of this later on. So when we speak of transition or signal words, these are linking words, of course, or phrases that help the writer connect his or her ideas in writing. Okay, but before going to that, let me tell you that when you compare, let me underscore. To compare means that you will focus on the subject's individual elements that make them similar to the subjects they are being compared with. Meanwhile, to contrast means that you are going to highlight the components that make them different to the subjects they are being compared with. In making revision, you call the edited work of a writer a revision. They need to provide, of course, feedback correct errors, and overall improve the written output. When you are making revisions for any kind of text, including comparison and contrast, which I discussed a while ago, you must consider the following strategies to make your output clear, concise, and coherent, and to make your intended message easy to understand. Especially make sure that spellings are all correct, the appropriate punctuation marks are used properly, and also transition or signal words, which I'm mentioning right now, wherein I told you that transition or signal words are linking words or phrases that help the writer connect his or her ideas in writing. Later on, you could use all of this transition or signal words in making your own composition. Okay? So correct spelling leaves actually an impression to a reader. As the author or of your own output, you want to make the reader, of course, feel that you made an effort to write your own composition. So checking your work for spelling, as well as the grammar and content issues, shows that you are thinking about your readers and you do not want them to think that you are sloppy and do not bother to check your compositions. As I mentioned, also using appropriate punctuation marks, it's a very important aspect of writing, okay? Because young learners like you should also practice and develop the use of it, okay? It is an essential element actually in writing that clarifies the meaning of your messages. When you use the correct or the appropriate punctuation mark, so when they are used appropriately, they can change the entire message of your composition or major part in your text. Okay, so now, what are some examples of these signal words or the transition? Okay, for comparison, here are some examples of the signal words that you could use in your writing. You may use similarly, alike, compared with, either or, likewise, resemble, same as, not only, but also, as well as. While in contrast, you may use while, although, however, in contrast, instead of, as opposed of, on the other hand, unless, more than. So these are some examples of signal words that you could use in writing. Now, when writing, you will have to undergo all its stages actually to really make your composition clear and concise. Okay, so allow feedback also and criticism of others in your work so that you could come up with a good composition. Okay, now I'll be asking you for an activity. I'll be asking you to think of your favorite authors, or if you don't have, even stories, your two favorite stories. And then I want you to write a composition about them, showing comparison and contrast using Venn diagram. You may say something about the authors, your favorite authors. How are they similar and how are they different from each other? Or if you do not have authors, you may also compare two stories. How are they similar and how are they different also, using the Venn diagram. So collate all your ideas by writing all of them in the Venn diagram. Okay? Then after that, when you have written already all the comparisons and the contrasts, now the similarities and the differences between the authors or the stories that you have selected, this time I'd like you to show and present your work to the class using the diagram, and then let's allow your classmates to give their own feedback before make your own revision of your work based from the gathered feedback that they have given you. This time, you will now write your own composition entitled My Favorite Author or My Favorite Story. Okay? That will be your first composition. Okay? So I hope this one is clear. Do you know what to do? So if ever you have questions, you may ask questions later on. Okay? Okay. If there's none, maybe we could start making your, or you could start making your own composition already. Your topic will be my favorite author or my favorite story.